Hello, everyone.
Howdy.
Welcome to the live stream. Welcome to the live stream. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to trickle in, and then we're going to get started. We have what I hope is a really informative presentation on the new 213A side impact standard. Heather and I are also going to introduce ourselves. We know that there might be some people who haven't found us yet, and this might be their first exposure with us. So again, thank you for everyone who is joining us on this lovely Friday evening. In case you're wondering why Friday evening, initially we had the thought that it would be like a car seat happy hour. We used to do those during the pandemic and when there wasn't anything else going on, and it was kind of fun. And so we thought maybe we'd get back to that. And then we came up with sort of a serious subject for the first live stream. So it doesn't feel very happy hour-ish, but that was the intention. The intention would be that your work week hopefully is done and that you're home and you've got some comfy pajamas and some snacks ready, and we can do a deep dive into a serious topic. For those of you who don't know me, I will introduce myself. I am Kecia Healy. I am a child passenger safety technician instructor from New York. I have been a CPST-I. This year will be 20 years of being an instructor. I've been a technician since 2002, and that seems like a very long time ago. And I don't really like to talk about how long I've been in the car seat world because it makes me not feel young, but I still feel young, and I'm so thankful to have been here throughout all of this and happy to impart some of my knowledge today. Heather, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, you've already introduced me, so.
Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Heather, and yeah, I've been doing car seats for a long time as well. I've been a tech since since March of. I just realized it's been almost exactly since March 2001. So that's a really long time. And I've been an instructor since 2006, and I don't want to do the math. So that's kind of an odd year. So yeah, somebody else can figure it out for me.
Yes.
So it's a long time. And so I'm going to sit here and try and do the math, and I don't want to.
It's 19 years, Heather, 19, because next year will be 26, and then it'll be a nice round 20, but it's okay.
Okay.
You know, we don't have to math in the car seat world too often, unless we're like calculating pretend crash forces, and then you're expected to do some math. I can't tell you how many times over the years people have gotten the math question wrong on the certification course. I get it. Like, nobody told you there was going to be a math question.
Yeah, I'm like, take your calculator out. Stop doing it in your head. You always get it wrong. Take your calculator out. And now that's gone. So anyways,
yes.
But yeah, so.
Oh, that's right. That question is no longer. Yeah, I haven't taught the new curriculum yet. We've been preparing for it. We had a day-long instructor meeting back in January where we really were just going through it. But I know you had an opportunity to teach the new curriculum recently. How did it go?
Really well. It was actually a lot of fun. It was very similar and yet different. So it flowed really well. It was probably the smoothest rollout of a curriculum that we've had ever. So it was really
that gives me hope.
Yeah.
And this is my 5th curriculum, I think. I've learned to roll with it, but sometimes the rollout is choppy. And so I'm hoping with a lot of preparation this time, it'll be less choppy.
Yeah. No. All
right.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And I'm really excited about how the slides look. It looks a lot better than the previous versions of the curriculum. So shout out everyone who worked on the new curriculum. Thank you.
Yes.
You'll get to reap the benefits.
Huge improvement. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're going to get started because there's no reason to dilly-dally. I'm going to let you know that I have some paper notes here, so you may hear some paper shuffling in the background as I read off of my notes, and it's because I can't see my presenter notes when I go into presentation mode here on the live stream. I figured that out at least in time to print out my notes. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to presenter mode. And I'm going to get started on this presentation. This is an adaptation of a presentation that I gave at Kids in Motion back in 22. Wow, 22. Yeah, it was right after the final rule was announced. And so obviously there's been not so much updates. There have been some updates to the updates. I will talk about that when I get to that part. But this is basically an adaptation of that presentation. So if you were there at Kids in Motion in 2022 and you saw my initial presentation, this will look somewhat similar. I'm going to move to presenter mode on my side. Yes, present. Why are you not changing? Hold on.
Because it's live.
It worked before. Oh, hold on one second. There we go. Okay. We're good. My tech support, Jack, is in the background looking at me like, you okay? Yes, good. All right. So title of this presentation is FMVSS 213A, Understanding the New Side Impact Standard. I know there are going to be a lot of questions. We're just going to ask everyone to please hold your questions to the end. I may answer them throughout this presentation, but if not, there's going to be plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So please just, I love your questions, but try to hold them to the end if possible. All right, what I need you to know about 213A is that it was designed to work within the framework of the existing 213 frontal standard. And basically this new standard is going to require that car seats to restrain the dummy in a side test, manage side crash forces, and prevent harmful head contact with side structures. These are going to be our objectives. We're going to summarize the new side impact standard. We're going to discuss the ATD selection and the test parameters / methodology. And we're going to explore the positive impacts and the potential shortcomings. Excuse me, my voice is a little of the new standard. So why is a federal side impact test for CRS important? You'll notice I'm going to use CRS throughout these slides, and it's basically just NHTSA terminology for child restraint systems. We don't typically use CRS in the tech world, but this is how NHTSA refers to child restraint systems, so I'm using CRS in these slides. Mm-hmm. But really, not surprisingly, real-world data shows that head injuries are among the most common type of injury in side impact crashes to children in that 0 to 4 age range. And therefore, this new standard is potentially a big step forward in protecting our smallest passengers. And although they're much less common than frontal impacts, they are almost equal to frontal crashes as a source of serious and fatal injury to children all the way up to 12. So clearly this is something that needs to be addressed. So 213A is trying to simulate the dynamic sled test in 214. So FMVSS 214 is a dynamic sled test for vehicles, which simulates the change in velocity via a small car being hit by a movable, deformable barrier. So this side impact test has been designed to simulate this full-scale vehicle-to-vehicle side impact crash. Essentially, the new test simulates what happens when a small car, like a Nissan Sentra, moves through an intersection at a low speed and then is T-boned by another car. So they're trying to do all of this in a lab setting. The final side impact seat assembly, which they will use the acronym SISA. So the finalized side impact seat assembly test sled is based on a modified acceleration sled system developed by Takata. The test buck consists of a sliding vehicle seat mounted, and when I say vehicle seat, mounted to a rail system along with a side door structure, which is rigidly mounted to the sled buck structure. This is the first test in the world for a CRS in a sled system that simulates both the vehicle acceleration and the intruding door of a small passenger car. The intrusion element of this test is very important since we know that intrusion is a major factor in causing injuries in real-world side impact crashes. Additionally, the vehicle acceleration aspect is important because there is this forward velocity component of most side impact crashes. Rarely are you sitting still when you're T-boned. The most common scenario is that your vehicle is traveling through an intersection when another vehicle blows a stop sign or a red light and then T-bones you. But you're moving forward while you are hit by something else. And so this particular test is the first in the world for combining both of those elements of intrusion and simulating that forward velocity component of the child in a child restraint. This test is only a near side impact test. So NHTSA is not trying to evaluate far side impacts. Far side impacts honestly have so many variables that it would be very, very difficult to try to develop a test for far side impact. So they're testing CRS in near side impact only. There are going to be 2 ATDs that are going to be used, and we're going to talk a little bit at length about which dummy for which scenario. So they'll be using CRABBY for some tests, and CRABBY is it's an acronym. I love acronyms. I'm going to take a stab at this. I think it's child restraint airbag interaction. I think that's the I is interaction. Anyhow, somebody can shout out in the notes and tell me if I'm correct. I think CRABBY is child restraint airbag interaction dummy, but essentially it's the 12-month-old dummy that they use in frontal crash testing. And CRABBY weighs 22 pounds and is 29 inches tall. They're also going to be using Q3S, which is the side impact version of the 3-year-old Q series dummy, which was developed in Europe. And Q3S is 32 pounds and 38.5 inches tall. So we're going to talk a little bit about selection criteria. Which ATD will you use for different types of car seats? So for any child restraint system that is rated for a child weight of anywhere between 11 and 30 pounds or has a stated height limit of anywhere between basically 650 and 870 millimeters, these products will test only with CRABBY.
Child restraint and airbag interaction.
Yeah, child restraint airbag interaction. Yeah. Woo! I give myself like trivia points for that. I do love acronyms. So basically any seat, once compliance is required, any seat rated beyond 30 pounds would be required to test and pass with Q3S, which I'm going to talk about next. Q3S is 32 pounds and 38.5 inches tall. They're also going to be using Q3S, which is the 3-year-old Q series dummy, which was developed in Europe. And Q3S is 32 pounds and 38.5 inches tall. They're also going to be using Q3S, which is the 3-year-old Q series dummy, which was developed in Europe. And Q3S is 32 pounds and 38.5 inches tall. Basically, all of the infant seats have either already backtracked to 30 pounds or they're in the process of backtracking to 30 pounds if they're going to stick around. So all of those seats that had been 35s are all going to backtrack to a maximum weight of 30 pounds. And it's because the bigger Q3S dummy doesn't fit in the infant seat. So as long as you're not rating your product beyond 30 pounds, you will test with crabbing. Now, if you have a car seat rated to include a weight range of, I said between 30 and 40, but what I really meant is above 30, but not more than 40, or with stated height limits that range between 34 and 43.3 inches, which again, you're getting these oddball numbers because the standard is actually in millimeters. So they're nice round numbers in millimeters or centimeters. So anywhere between 870 and 1100 millimeters in height, those products will test with Q3S. Oh, hang on. I put my slides in the wrong order. Hang on, not my slides, my notes. My notes were in the wrong order. All right, so basically what this means is that if you have a car seat that's rated from, let's say, 4 to 65 pounds, or from 22 to 50 pounds, or from 30 to 65 pounds, any of these ranges are going to be required to test and pass with Q3S. And this could mean boosters and infant seats if their stated weight or height range was in this limit. We're going to talk about that next. So most booster seats are not going to pass side impact standard. And it's not really a cop-out, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But at this point, as long as your booster seat starts at least 40 pounds and at least 43.3 inches tall, you will not be required to pass the side impact standard. And while it seems like a cop-out or, a skirting of the rules, it's really not. It would be difficult, if not impossible, for any current booster seat design to pass the side impact test using just a lap and shoulder seat belt. And the other thing to note is that children who are over 40 pounds and at least 43 inches tall are typically big enough to take advantage of the vehicle side impact protection systems like curtain airbags, especially when they're seated on the platform of a booster, right? So your kid may only be 44 inches tall, but once they're sitting on a platform that lifts them up another 4 inches tall, they're going to be tall enough to take advantage of the vehicle's protection system, like the curtain airbags. So here we have a product which is an all-in-one, right? It's rear-facing, it's forward-facing, it's booster mode. So I'm trying to call out how these seats would be tested in the new standards. So for example, this is a product that is rear-facing, probably 4 to 40. And in this case, it would be tested rear-facing with Q3S. And now this same product is currently 26.5 to 65 pounds. It's going to test forward-facing with Q3S. But booster mode will not be tested as long as this product starts at 40 pounds and 43 inches in booster mode. This is a slide talking about the different installation method for the side impact testing. So we are now getting a lap and shoulder belt. Hallelujah. It's only taken 50 years. But basically, if you have a rear-facing child restraint, it will be tested with lower anchors. It will also be tested installed with the lap and shoulder seatbelt. If you have a forward-facing CRS, it's going to be installed with latch, meaning lower anchors and tether, but it will also be installed with seatbelt, 3-point seatbelt, and tether. Okay, we're going to get into the performance requirements now. So if you're testing with CPST, let's say you're an infant seat and you're testing with CPST, it is a pass-fail test, so it's not going to be like 2 stars, 3 stars, 5 stars. You either pass or you don't. CPST is going to be used just for containment by evaluating head-to-door contact. So if you have an infant seat, you basically just have 2 jobs. One job is to maintain structural integrity, right? You can't have things falling apart during the test. But the other bigger thing, well, not bigger thing, because obviously structural integrity is important. The other thing is CPST's head cannot make contact with the intruding door structure. So the car seat has to be able to contain the dummy's head so that the head doesn't strike the intruding structure of the door. Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay. Yes, I just had to find my notes again. Apologies for that. So it's important to understand that there is no, I don't want to say that it doesn't exist, but it's certainly not ready for prime time. There is no smaller 12-month-old dummy that we can use right now to do proper side impact testing. So CPST is not instrumented in any way to measure side impacts. CPST is a frontal test dummy. But NHTSA was like, hey, this could be a useful tool to help us evaluate some aspects of child restraint performance in side impacts. So even though in this case the evaluation is limited simply to containment, structural integrity, and other related matters, CPST will be useful in its ability for us to measure head-to-door contact, right? So again, if you're testing an infant seat, you're using CPST, you basically have one big job, which is contain the dummy's head. Now, once you have to test with Q3S, which is a side impact dummy, now you're going to have actual performance requirements, right? You're going to have HIC. So HIC is head injury criteria. In this case, they're using HIC 15 as opposed to HIC 36. It's basically just HIC measured in 15 milliseconds. Please don't ask me questions about HIC. Well, you can ask me questions about HIC, but I'm going to punt them to someone else because that is not my area of expertise. But HIC is head injury criteria, which is being measured. And you have to stay equal to or under 570 HIC score when measured in HIC 15. You have to stay equal or under 23 millimeters of chest deflection. So, I don't know if you saw that. The lights went out for a moment. Gotta love energy efficient buildings. All right, and you must test and pass under both of these limits, plus maintain structural integrity in order to pass the side impact test. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about limitations of 213A. So we have limited dummy sizes, which really restricts the applicability of these standards to children over 40 pounds. Right now, there's really no appropriate ATD for representing kids over 40 pounds. Also, according to a study that was done back in 2011, the NCRUS study, they found that only about 8% of 6-year-olds were still restrained in a car seat with a harness. Now, granted, this is 14 years ago, right? And so I'd like to think that we have more 6-year-olds in a harness than we did back in 2011, but still the vast majority of kids by age 6 are riding in booster seats. So there wasn't this great need to really try to push for side impact testing with bigger dummies because most of the bigger kids are riding in boosters. NHTSA also determined that the seated height of children over 40 pounds when using a booster is typically sufficient to take advantage of the vehicle's side impact protection system, which is what I had mentioned earlier. Now, so older, taller children fit to vehicle. As kids get bigger, they are more likely to get protection from the vehicle, right? And this is a really good example of that because you can see where this child's head is in relation to the door sill and the window. So when the curtain airbag drops down and covers the window, this child's head is, yes, it's going to get some protection from the booster, but really the vehicle is going to be doing most of the protecting of the child at that point. So limitations of 213A. Well, infant seats are only going to be tested with Krabby. And Krabby's not a side impact dummy. And Krabby can't really measure anything related to side impact. So it doesn't really give us any meaningful data in a side impact crash. Only Q3S can provide meaningful data that correlates to potential head and chest injury risks in a side impact crash. And that's a picture of me in Q3S at CalSpan. Shout out my friends at CalSpan. Thank you for letting me come in and have a photo op. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So one of the limitations here is that when you're testing with Q3S, there's no requirement to contain the head. The test allows the ATD's head to strike the surface of the intruding door. And when I first started diving into this, I was a little surprised to see that they were going to allow head contact. But hear me out, because this was their rationale for allowing it. NHTSA believes that there is no need for Q3S performance criterion that would prohibit head contact with the intruding door. Video analysis suggested that the peak head acceleration was most likely the result of Q3S head contacting the side of the CRS at the time that the CRS contacted the intruding door. So both of those things happening simultaneously. Given that the head acceleration values computed during the time of head to door contact were lower than the peak head acceleration overall, NHTSA believes that the risk of head injury from head to door contacts were much lower than the risk of head injury from peak acceleration. For these reasons, NHTSA has decided not to use a performance criterion based on head contact in tests with Q3S because HIC 15 appears better able to discern between soft, non-injurious contacts and hard, injurious contacts, and thus would be a better indicator of head injury in the side impact test. So what they're saying is, let HIC tell you the story, right? That when the dummy's head is striking, if it's not a hard, injurious contact, then they're okay with it. So after I read the rationale, it made sense to just follow the HIC scores. The HIC scores will tell you if this is an injurious head contact or not. But still, I think it's the kind of thing that would surprise most technicians. It certainly surprised me when I first read into the final rule to see that, yeah, they're going to allow head contact with testing with the Q3S. Just as a reminder, you cannot have head contact with Krabby, but you can with Q3S as long as you stay under those performance criteria of HIC 15 has to be lower than 570, chest deflection has to be lower than, I think it was 23 millimeters. All right, another limitation is that combination or all-in-one seats with the harness, especially if we're talking about a seat with a limit less than 65 pounds, could be maxed out by weight before the child reaches the booster height minimum of 43 inches. And this is much more likely to happen if you have a seat that's only rated to 40 or 50 pounds with the harness. But I think a good example of that would be the Chase, right? The old Chase was 22 to 40 pounds. The new Chase is 30 to 40 pounds with the harness, right? And yes, okay, Chase turns into a booster, but you have to be at least 43.3 inches tall to use this seat in booster mode. So there are many children out there who would be too heavy for the harness, but then not tall enough to use this seat in booster mode. And that's going to be like a tough situation for technicians to have to explain to parents, like, yeah, you've exceeded one limit, but you don't meet the minimum of another requirement. And so this seat just doesn't work for your kid at all right now. Again, I think it's going to be less of an issue with 65-pound seats, and we have many of those. Another limitation is that it's exclusively a left impact test. Although NHTSA said that they were confident that manufacturers would try to cut corners by adding countermeasures solely to the left side. But don't laugh, because that's what vehicle manufacturers did when, like, the IIHS started doing like small overlap.
Yeah.
They made all the changes to the driver's side and then did not make those same changes to the passenger side. But I think it would be a little bit more obvious with a car seat that, like, if all the
one side really big,
on one side and the other side was just like, nah, we're good. There are a lot of reasons to celebrate. 213A is going to simulate real-world side impact crashes better than any other standardized sled test anywhere in the world. We're finally going to be testing with a 3-point seatbelt. That has been the number one thing that Kecia wishes for Christmas every year for as long as I can remember, and it's finally going to happen. Also, this enhanced side impact protection on a lot of the convertible and combination seats will benefit the taller and heavier children as well, even though we don't have a dummy to test them. Also, all booster seats are now going to start at 40 pounds. So gone are the days of 30-pound minimums on boosters. And if nothing else, we're going to get all the car seat manufacturers on the same page in terms of testing side impact. Because prior to this, all the manufacturers were focusing on side impact and making it a priority, but everyone's test method was proprietary. You never knew what anyone was doing, and what this one was doing, that one was doing something else. And so at this point, everyone is on the same page, and I'm really excited about these changes. There are going to be some exemptions. There will be exemptions for harnesses, which are vests. Things like the Ride Safer Travel vest are exempt, because realistically, there is no way for a product like an Easy On vest or a Ride Safer Travel vest to pass the side impact standard. Like, there's no structure. Car beds will also be exempt, and products with minimum weight limits above 40 pounds and minimum height limits above 43 inches also are exempt from testing and passing side impact. All right, so compliance requirements. Compliance is mandatory by June 30th of this year. And I just can't believe how quickly the time flew, because when I presented at Kids in Motion, the final rule had just taken effect or just been published. And, we were still like 3 years away, and now here it is, and it's basically knocking on our door. June 30th is around the corner. Early compliance is optional. We're already seeing products on the market that are compliant with the new standard, so that's great. And if a child restraint is manufactured after the compliance date, but it doesn't comply, then it will be subject to recall. So everything manufactured after June 30th should be compliant with the side impact standard. Oh, that was the slide that well, I'll talk about this at the end. There's going to be, I'm going to put a link. I don't have the link right now, but I'm going to come back tomorrow and add a link in the comments section to the article that we will be posting on thecarseatpros.com, which is going to have all of these details and a bunch more. So everything is going to be there. I meant to get it all up today, and I just didn't have time. But I promise by tomorrow, that's going to be all that information. That article is going to be in thecarseatpros.com, so you can read it in depth, you can share it, and you can use it to cure your insomnia. All right. Before we move to Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about 213B. So 213B is a separate section of FMVSS 213, just like 213A. It's going to be integrated into the frontal standard. They didn't want to make a whole new standard for it. But 213B highlights, there are going to be some updates to the frontal test bench. Some of those updates are going to include things like stiffer foam, testing with 3-point seatbelt, and eliminating testing with a lap-only seatbelt. There's going to be amended label requirements. So it's going to be mandated that there is weight and height range for each mode the car seat can be used, rear-facing, forward-facing, and booster. Currently, you'll notice on labels, it'll say things like, only for use for children who weigh between 4 and 65 pounds, right? But it doesn't specify which part of that is rear-facing, which part of that is forward-facing. So now it's going to mandate weight and height ranges for each mode that the car seat can be used. There are going to be increased minimum requirements for forward-facing and booster. I'm going to get into detail about that. And there are going to be more options for registering a car seat. So there's still going to be the mail-in card that comes attached to it, but now manufacturers may have other options for promoting registration. So maybe we'll see things like QR codes and I don't know, anything besides the mail-in card. The mail-in card will continue to exist, but I think a lot of parents would rather just have a QR code to register their products, and anything that we can do to increase product registration, because product registration, it's abysmal. I think the number is something like less than 10% of all child restraint products are actually registered. And this is the only way that the manufacturer has to reach you if there's a problem down the line. So please, please, please mail in those registration cards. Or right now, you can go online. Most of the manufacturers have a way through their website to input the information to register your seats. Also, if you're at a car seat check and you're filling them out for parents, please make sure your writing is legible. There's some poor data input person on the other end who needs to be able to read what you wrote and type it in correctly. And if you wrote chicken scratch that is illegible, there's a good chance that that car seat doesn't get registered to the appropriate address. So please be neat when you're filling out those cards. That's my PSA. All right, talking about increased weight minimums. So, and again, the compliance deadline for this is also June 30th. Any car seat that can be used forward-facing, not manufactured after June 30th of this year, is required to have a forward-facing weight minimum of at least 26.5 pounds. And that's 12 kilos. It's unfortunate that it didn't come to be a nice round number in, what do we use? Is it the imperial system? Is that what it's called?
I think so.
I think it's the imperial. Yeah. I think there's 1 or 2 other countries in the world that use the imperial system. And I looked up what they were somewhat recently, and I don't remember what they were, but one of them was Myanmar, and the other one was yeah. Anyhow, 12 kilos, people, 12 kilos. Forward-facing minimum is going to be at least 12 kilos, which means at least 26 and a half pounds. We've already seen a lot of seats that have been updated with these new forward-facing weight minimums.
Yemen.
Yemen, is it Yemen?
Yeah.
Yemen and Myanmar. Woo, here we are. Yeah, I don't understand why we can't get on board with metric, but that is a whole another conversation for another time. So anyhow, we're starting to see seats already that are labeled starting at 26 and a half pounds or greater. Some of the manufacturers are just rounding to 30, and they're just starting at 30 rather than starting at 26 and a half. But you could be at 26 and a half, you could be at 27, you could be at 28, you could be at 28.3, you could be at 30, but you have to be at least 12 kilos. So why did NHTSA raise the minimum weight requirement for forward facing? They were very clear in the final rule what their rationale was. And it wasn't about rear facing 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds. It wasn't even about rear facing 1-year-olds. It was to ensure that bigger babies who were not yet 1 year old remained rear facing. You know, they were aware of the fact that there are babies who weigh more than 22 pounds who are not 12 months old yet. And they really wanted to make sure that they captured, maybe that's a bad word, that those children were covered by higher forward-facing minimums. Right? But in case anyone is under the assumption that it's to keep bigger, older kids rear facing, it really isn't. It's all about those bigger babies who are not yet 1 year old. So we're also seeing booster seats and car seats with a booster mode that must have weight minimums of at least 40 pounds and height minimums of at least 43 inches. So this is what's the word that I'm looking for? It's harmonized with the side impact stuff, right? So, but even aside from side impact, the 213B wants increased weight minimums and height minimums for booster use. A lot of these products were already compliant. A lot of manufacturers are already at 40 pounds and 43 inches. So I don't think we're going to see big changes on the labels. But if there are products out there currently that are rated booster mode less than 40 pounds, or maybe there's a height limit lower than 43 inches, you're going to see those change before the compliance deadline of June 30th. Again, rationale, why? And it was clear that increasing the weight and height minimums for boosters keeps kids in 5-point harnesses longer. And we've known for a long time that children under 40 pounds are best protected in a 5-point harness. And it makes sense that kids that are over 43 inches tall, when seated on the platform of a booster, are going to be tall enough to take advantage of the vehicle safety features. All right, and that's it. This is my shout out to all of you. Thank you for your passion and your dedication to child passenger safety. I have to warn you, once you are infected with this virus, it never leaves your system. You may be stuck here forever like us, but you'll be in good company. And I really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to go back to the other slide screens, whatever they call it, and then we're going to take some questions.
Did she remove herself?
I did.
Okay,
I removed myself, but then I added myself back.
Okay.
I'll get the hang of this. Let me just remove this here. There we go. All right. So questions. What do we have? I do see a comment from Gary. Gary, my shout out, Gary Scales, who said he can try to help with any HIC questions at the end if needed. Thank you, Gary. I am definitely, that is way above my pay grade. But if anybody had, HIC computations are really involved, like they're formulas. So, yes,
Yeah,
if anybody has, I do know the difference between HIC 15 and HIC 36 is that HIC 15 is measured in 15 milliseconds as opposed to 36, which is in 36 milliseconds. But that is about the extent of what I can tell you about HIC 15.
Yeah, I think it's twice as fast.
And, you know, in the final rule, there was some discussion about why they thought HIC 15 was better, a better application or a better standard for the side impact test as opposed to HIC 36. But that was like over my head.
Yeah, I have a vague memory of it, but yeah. Anyways, more restrictive. Yep. Michaela asked, are they still testing forward facing without tether? And I'm not sure because she asked that when we were talking early on about the side impact testing, which doesn't apply with side impact because they are testing
so I can answer that question. They will continue to test frontal with and without tether. And they need to, because even though the majority of our vehicle fleet at this point has tether anchors, tether use is still abysmal. So it's really important that there be testing and compliance limits for head excursion and knee excursion and all those other things without tethering, because we know in the real world a lot of parents and a lot of car seats are not tethered. The interesting thing I found, there was a big discussion in the final rule about whether or not they would require tethering in the side impact test. And it turned out that at the end they were like, yeah, we're gonna do it with tether. But they were like, it doesn't really matter because the side impact test happens so fast that the tether really doesn't have a chance to do anything, which I thought was super interesting. So yes, they're using tether for side impact, although they didn't really think it was advantageous to do so. Just, I think, for the sake of consistency, they were going to require tethering. But frontal tests will continue. There will continue to be two limits, one with tether and one without. Anything else?
Do you think there will be pushback from CG?
CG? Do you think there will be pushback from... All right, can somebody clarify what CG is?
We'll wait for her to answer.
Yeah. I know you can all see each other's comments, but Gary is talking about HIC 15 better represents impacts which take place with shorter waveforms. So basically injuries which occur quicker. Gary is my new best friend. And for those of you who saw the funny post on Facebook about the Britax family reunion recently, it was because I had a chance to spend some time with Gary. He came to help me out with the school bus training. And then on the way back, we stopped here and we had the little Britax family reunion. But I adore Gary Scales. I'm so glad that he's had a chance to join us. In a little while, I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff that's upcoming that Gary will be a part of. So Gary says center of gravity, question mark? Okay, so what was the question again? And does it make sense if CG is center of gravity?
Do you think there will be pushback from CG? I'm sorry, Ariane. Is it Ariane or Ariane? When you only read people's names on Facebook, you kind of pronounce them your own way. So
caregiver. Jackson.
Caregivers.
Okay. Do you think there will be pushback? Yes, that makes sense. Much more sense than center of gravity. Will there be pushback from caregivers? Probably. There's going to be some caregivers somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that what you mean by pushback is us talking about increased weight limits for forward facing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where you're going to see the pushback from caregivers,
Mhm.
especially if they have two of the same or similar products, but they bought one 6 months ago and then they bought one yesterday, and the one 6 months ago is forward facing 22 to 65 pounds, and then the one they bought yesterday is forward facing 30 to 65 pounds, and they're going to be like, what the heck? Especially if the kid doesn't weigh 30 pounds and is already forward facing. So yeah, I think there's going to be, in certain situations, there's going to be pushback. I think our responsibility as child passenger safety technicians is simply to point out the information. Like, I didn't make these rules. I didn't make these labels. Standards have changed. We've got a new side impact standard now. And there hasn't been any major change to car seats ever in terms of standards. Like, okay, we got latch, in the late 90s, we started phasing in tethers, and then they had to add lower anchor attachments. And there was some redesigning of some models to make them latch compatible. And I'm not sure how much trouble that was, but like, this is the first major change in US car seat regulation that we've had perhaps ever.
Yeah. At least in
other than latch. What else has happened other than latch? Now, there's been obviously a lot of changes over the years, but those changes have not been driven by changes in standard.
Mhm.
Those are just changes that have happened because of shifts in consumer spending and the things, consumer driven features that consumer wants. We want higher weight limits, we want this, we want that, and the market responds and gives us those things. But those things have not been driven by changes in standards. They've just been driven by changes in how we spend our money, and manufacturers take notice.
Right. I can't think of the last change was in the early 2000s. So, it's been decades.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I do think that you will get some pushback from some manufacturers, and you're just gonna do your best to point out that times are changing, and if there's nothing anyone can, when it comes to from NHTSA, there's nothing that anyone can do. However, there are some products that are starting at 30. And so if a consumer was unhappy because the product was starting at 30 pounds, manufacturers do have the option to start at 26 and a half. So that's something that I would just say, hey, why don't you let ABC manufacturer know that you wish that they would start at 26 and a half instead of 30, because those are things that are within a manufacturer's control, but you can't start at 22 anymore. You just can't. So Emma says she missed the first 10 minutes. How will the side impact inserts in seats be helpful? So I think if you're seeing any inserts, meaning like soft goods things,
probably like EPS, extra EPS foam, like the enhanced.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't really consider, when I think of inserts, I think of like soft good newborn inserts, but those are all things that manufacturers are doing, likely to try to lower HIC scores in the test. If your HIC score, and it's not just that 570, like if you're a manufacturer, you don't want to be anywhere near 570. You want to have this large cushion of not being anywhere near 570. So you're going to experiment with different types of foams and placement of little bump outs, and then just try to lower your HIC scores as much as possible.
Oh, she said the soft goods. She clarified.
Oh, okay. The soft goods. So a lot of times those soft goods are really just infant inserts. I haven't seen, somebody can correct me if they've seen something, but I haven't seen any new product where the soft goods were specific to side impact. I think they're just meant
It's been
to
a
be.
long time. Yeah, I mean, I recall an infant seat, and I can't even remember the manufacturer now, but it was a long time ago where they actually said that the insert was did have some
So they didn't want you to remove it,
right.
right? So it was like an infant insert. Well, I think like, wasn't the Juno like that? Didn't the Juno
I
at
think at
some
one point it was, but now
Yeah.
it's more optional. They don't require it, but they highly suggest
recommend
you leave it
it?
in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was
But
it
there
the
was
infant inserts? Sorry, go ahead.
no, it was there was another seat. That's all I said.
Okay. So, I mean, Heather, do you want to, we have some more questions. I can read them too, but I'm not wearing my glasses. And
And it's a comment on the
so,
number of young kids who exceed 65 pounds but are far from 43 inches. Not that we want to see 3 and 4-year-olds in boosters, but will this leave more kids in limbo?
so NHTSA did not comment on younger kids exceeding 65 pounds. Yeah, those kids exist. I think, honestly, if you have a situation where you have a child, let's say a child less than age 4, right? I mean, I had a situation recently where I had a 2-year-old who was 68 pounds. And yes, we weighed her because I wasn't convinced that she was actually 68 pounds. And she was. She was almost 3, but she wasn't 3 yet. She was 2, and she weighed 68 pounds. And I don't have any seats that go beyond 65 pounds with harness. So we really didn't have much of a choice at that moment, but to put her in a booster seat. But I think whenever in a situation like that, like the family's here, there's nothing I can do except try to, get good belt fit in a booster. But I think when it's possible for you to reach out ahead of time to a manufacturer, let's say if it's your own child, right, and you realize that this is looming, this is coming, you're like, hey, my child is 68 pounds and is only 40 inches tall, reach out to the manufacturer of the seat that you have, because it's possible that on a case-by-case basis, they may give you some leeway. Because, right, otherwise, what are you going to do when you have a kid who's not tall enough for a booster, but too heavy for the harness car seat? Like, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And so if it's your child, and you know that this is coming because your child is reaching that point where he or she are going to exceed the weight limit, I would suggest reaching out to whoever the manufacturer is, Graco, Evenflow, Kiko, whoever, and explain the situation and see what they say. Because I'd like to think that they would work with you.
Yep.
So Emma said that the Joy Saffron and the new Forever DLX.
The EPP foam, think like the 360 cushion and then the EPP foam that's in the saffron shoulder.
The saffron, okay, so have a newborn insert and a side impact insert soft goods below that. Interesting. Okay. I haven't seen saffron yet. It's a brand new product. I haven't been to any trade shows or conferences since they rolled it out, so I'm really not familiar. I can't speak to that, but obviously if they tell you have to use it, then there's a reason for it. It's doing something, even if we don't know what exactly that something is.
Yeah, it takes weeks to get new seats out here, so I feel like I live in a different country.
Live in tumbleweed country.
I know.
Dust storm country. Heather's in Vegas, for those of you who don't know.
We're
Live
a big
in
city and
desert.
it's still we get nothing out here.
I see that Brian made a comment here, and he said that from Evenflow's perspective, the 26.5 pound change might not be a huge deal. Them changing their forward-facing minimum age to age 2, from their lens, did not seem to be a big deal. There did not seem to be a lot of pushback from their perspective when they increased the forward-facing minimum to 2 years old. And I tend to agree with that. But here's the thing: there are plenty of parents out there that are just going to do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to forward face their 10-month-old if that's what they have it in their head that they're going to do. And, we can make regulatory changes and we can make recommendations and we can educate. But at the end of the day, that parent or caregiver is going to do what it is that they want to do. So I'd like to think that the kind of people who are seeking out help from a child passenger safety technician are the kind of people who are not going to give you too much pushback on things that are outside of your control.
How will these rulings impact other harnesses like the Ride Safer travel vest? They won't.
They won't. Harnesses are exempt because there's no way for them to pass side impact. I see Gary responding to Emma about a lot of the designers about balancing chest deflection with hic, and again, there's a lot of trade-offs. You gain something here and oftentimes you give something there. And it's always that great balancing act to try to get everything within an acceptable range. Has anyone seen any of the new side impact compliant products that are out there? I've been taking some videos at Walmart and sharing them on Instagram and our YouTube channel. Also, for those of you who are here, if you are enjoying our content, if you want to see more live streams like this geared towards the CPS tech community, please like and subscribe. I mean, that's really going to go a long way in helping us to continue to bring this type of content to the community. With that, I think I'll segue into our next live stream. So I think we've decided on the date of April 4th. It's also going to be a Friday. It will be at the same time. So it'll be 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, other times at other times. You know what's funny? They always mention like Pacific and Central and Eastern, and no one ever mentions Mountain. It's like it doesn't exist. So for if any of you are on Mountain time, I'm sorry that you are just completely ignored or having to do the math all the time of like, okay, well, I'm in between Pacific and Central. But yes, so April 4th, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to do another live stream. Again, it's going to be geared towards the CPS tech community. And the discussion topic for our next live stream is going to be transporting children with disabilities, because we think that's a really important topic. And again, it's a topic where we know that there are a lot of questions and sometimes more questions than answers. So my esteemed colleagues, Gary Scales and Louisa Bollert-Vaughn, are going to be our guest speakers for that live stream. And if you have questions, if you have particular scenarios or situations in mind that you are struggling with, we're hoping to be able to address some of those at our next live stream. So again, that's going to be April 4th, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Gary says, as a former Albuquerque resident.
And that's my family, by the way. So,
not
Kecia's, you're East Coast. Couldn't tell by your accent.
What? Well, I got to say, what do New Yorkers say? We say water.
You throw R's on the end of your words.
Yeah. Because I grew up in Manhattan, so I don't have like a strong Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island accent. But but I appreciate a good New York accent. It's regional, right? It's almost like I can tell the difference between a Brooklyn accent and a Staten Island accent. And then, of course, you've got New Jersey. Shout out New Jersey, but they got a whole nother thing going on over there in New Jersey. Are there any questions that we didn't get to?
Yeah.
Yeah, and listen, if you think of a question, tonight at 2:00 in the morning when you just bolt up right out of bed and like, oh my goodness, I need to add, come back, put your question in the comment. We'll circle back to it. I'm going to come back tomorrow and put a link in the comments to an article at Car Seat Blog, which is going to have all of this information. Oh,
Car Seat Pros.
too many years of saying the other thing.
We'll edit that out.
We can. It's a live stream. Well, maybe we can edit the recording. But so many years of saying one thing. Have you ever had that? Like, if you ever had a job where you had that job for a long time, especially if you were answering the phones, right? Like, I used to work at Shearson Lehman Brothers, right? And you picked up the phone, it was like Shearson. And then I went to work for Refco. I can't tell you how many times I picked up the phone and just automatically said, Shearson. So that's what's going on right here. But yeah, we're going to post a link to an entire article in thecarseatpros.com all about the side impact standard. So you'll be able to link to it, share it with other techs, refer back to it as you need to. And again, if you have questions, come back, put them in the comments. We will circle back and answer questions as they pop up. But we really appreciate that you guys have taken time out of your Friday evening to join us here. I hope this was informative. I hope we answered some of your questions. And I think, a big question that didn't come up, but I was prepared for it because I think parents are going to ask a lot is, do I need a new car seat? So I know for those of you who are spending time in the online world, you're hearing that, you're getting that question. And, the short answer, do you need a new car seat? No. Do you want a new car seat? I mean, who am I to get in someone's way when they want to buy a new car seat? I mean, I am not the person that you call when you want to be talked out of a new car seat. But no, you don't need a new car seat. However, it's a really personal decision. If you have a seat and you're perfectly happy with it and it meets your needs and it fits your child and you can use it correctly and you're comfortable with it, there's really no reason. I don't want to say no reason, but I think it's fine to continue using that product. If, on the other hand, you're the kind of parent who's going to lose sleep at night thinking that there's something better out there and you have the means to replace your seat and you want to replace your seat, by all means, replace your seat. I would never tell a parent that they needed to replace their seat. But I am also that parent who would have probably gone out and bought a new seat after the standards changed. So I'm seeing both sides of it. Do what feels right. The other thing is designs are changing and you may think that you want the new version of what you have and you go to look at it and then you actually decide, no, I don't love it and I'm going to stick with what I have. Both of my kids had giant melon baby heads. And some of these side impact compliant seats are very narrow and have these deep head wings. And I don't know that my kids would have been happy in that kind of design. And so, again, there's no one answer that fits all. If we're talking about you and your child, do what feels right. If you want to replace your seat with something new that's side impact compliant, and you have the means to do that, then knock yourself out. But I would never tell another parent who has a perfectly good seat that's not expired, not recalled, that they were happy with until 10 minutes ago, I would not ever tell that parent that they need to replace their car seat. All right. If no one has any additional questions, I'm going to wrap, but I will say please come back and join us on April 4th. Hi, Karen. Thank you. Please come back on April 4th and join us for our next live stream. There will be a recording of this one that will be posted to YouTube. So if you missed something and you want to go back and watch it, you can. Hi, Erica. See all my friends. Thanks for coming on this Friday night and supporting us on our new adventure at thecarseatpros.com.
Yes, thank you all.
Yes, we appreciate you. We appreciate the work that the tech community does. We want to support you. And so we're going to try to do more content like this, but you can help us by liking and subscribing if you haven't already done so. So we appreciate you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Ciao. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you next month.